Hi everyone, this is Ricky Spencer for the Sociology of Media series, Voices. And today we have a topic that from the start I want to advise that is a trigger warning, because we're going to be exploring the complexities and I guess something that some of us have experienced in our life, and that is in relation to the idea of self-harm within the transgender, gender diverse community. We are very privileged to again speak to Tasha Turner, who's a counsellor who has worked in the field for many years, specialises in gender diverse supporting people who have issues within these areas. She is somebody who has worked very closely with a lot of people, and I admire her so much for her passion and her knowledge. Welcome, Tasha Turner, again.
Thank you for having me. I love talking to you. It's a great space.
So let's perhaps start, Tasha. What is self-harm?
I'm pausing because there are so many types of self-harm that a lot of people don't think of as self-harm. So at its basic, self-harm is where there's intentional injury to the self. Right? So and I'm glad you gave a trigger warning, because some of this I can't be vague about. Otherwise, what's the point of the talk? So self-harming can go from the kind of well-known cutting at different levels. There's grazing as well, but even self-harm can be poisoning. People poison themselves, self-mutilation, burning, and even eating disorders are considered as self-harm now in certain dynamics. So there's lots of different forms, and like I said, it basically boils down to, are you intentionally harming yourself? And it can be repetitive or it can be episodic.
And in this space, Tasha, why are we focusing today on transgender and gender diverse people?
Tragically, I was listening to a podcast this morning because I'm a podcast addict. So I was listening to one with very recent statistics from America. And I've got my little piece of cardboard where I've written it down, which is very technological. So when you look at the statistics, right, when you look at self-injury, it's 48% higher in the trans community than in the cisgender heterosexual community. It's 30% higher in the LGB community compared to cisgender heterosexual. And then when we go to youth, that's even more worrying. So when you look at between the age of 15 and I think it was 22 in the trans community, you're going up to 58 to 60%. And the figures for cisgender heterosexual people are generally about 1 in 5. So it's a lot more common than people believe.
And that's something that does relate to my research in exploring trans health within the early settings in high school, where a lot of my work at the moment is going through a lot of the material and highlighting what is reported, but I have a feeling it's also perhaps even underreported, because the complexity of someone saying or disclosing that they are trans or gender non-conforming is quite complicated. And this is why it's problematic in our research space, because when we're trying to quantify something in empirical lens, it presumes that everyone is going to identify. And I'm just wondering too, with your experience, Tasha, does that sometimes present problems that you've experienced, that people I mean, we can dispel some of the myths here too. Is there an age where someone identifies as trans?
Sorry. I can't help laughing at that question, because, no, right, is the answer to that. You can identify as trans from the age of like 3 or 4 up until 70 something. There is no particular age. At the moment, yes, you will find that compared to historically, there's more people identifying, between age 18 to 25 than they used to. That doesn't mean that, this proportion of trans people weren't around from day dot. Like you're saying before, it just wasn't disclosed. So we really don't know. And something else that they said on the podcast this morning, which was an interesting thought, was that because the research so far hasn't been as in-depth as it needs to be, they want to do another lot where it's the difference between self-harm in the trans community versus self-harm in the non-binary, gender fluid, genderqueer community. And then, yeah, of course, we get into the, well, hang on a minute, in different circles, non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, we're all trans. So, it's being careful with the wording, but still, it would be really interesting to know the breakdown. Is there a difference? Isn't there a difference? And then you've got what makes it even more complex is if you've got a trans person who's also gay, not heterosexual. Well, then they've got a double whammy of the, self-harming tendencies, not because they're LGBT, and we'll get to that, but you've got, intersectionality. And then what if you've got someone who's trans and gay and Black, right? It's another very high statistic level, and got a mental health disorder. All of those are big predisposing factors.
Now I want to go through, Tasha, with you. Why does someone resort to self-harm as a way of coping from your experience?
Yeah, there's lots of different reasons, and I'll run through briefly the main ones, and then I've actually got a list on my computer which I'll bring up because there's even more.
Sure.
So there's the few that people typically think of, which some people think cry for help. Sometimes, nowhere near as common as people believe it to be. It's more, self-harm can be a form of communication, which a lot of people don't understand. And what I mean by that is self-harm is always related to distress, whether that's physical distress or mental distress or both, it's distress. So for some people, when they're distressed, they are actually unable to communicate that properly. And some of us might think, well, why is that a problem? Well, for example, if you're autistic, then it's harder to communicate that. If you're someone who has been shamed and invalidated and abused, then you're not going to pipe up and go, oh, by the way, I'm not coping, because you've been brought up as, you're not important, we don't care. So sometimes self-harming is that, can you not see me? Can you not see how I don't even know how I can approach you? Right, so there's communication. There is the one that is possibly more prevalent than others, which is a way of releasing emotional distress. Now, a lot of people will go, why would you do that? Surely there's other reasons. You can cry, you can yell, you can call a friend. Yes, you can. And for a lot of people, that's not enough. So depending on, and obviously when you have certain mental health conditions like PTSD, OCD, borderline personality disorder, histrionic, some of those have a higher tendency with regards to self-harm. And what that means is when there's emotional distress, it's massive. It's every feeling is felt much bigger than people who don't battle that. So it's this volcanic sensation, and it's very much, I'm going to explode if I don't get this out. I need to do something big. Now, for some people, that might be, I'm going to punch a wall, right? Or for some people, it might be, I'm going to go and, get some heroin and stick that in my veins. For some people, they might have to go and work out in the gym for 6 hours and run themselves. For some people, it's okay, if I self-harm in some way, there is often a release, right? So some people have an endorphin release. And I'm getting a bit technical now, sorry, this is just how it happens. But some people, there's a genetic predisposition that they've now found through research. They actually get an endorphin release, and this is generally with cutting or self-mutilation, which becomes so addictive that then they do it again and again. And that's actually not about emotional distress, or it's not about communication. It's about the high that you get. And for a lot of us, we don't understand this because we don't have this in our genes. So that can be the endorphin rush. For other people, it can be, sometimes in life we're very numb, right? So when there's a lot of trauma, we can dissociate, and I won't go into big explanations because I'll be here for ages, but we can become numb because that's a way of coping. Everything around us is so awful that we turn off our emotions so that we can exist. However, we are also then aware, I'm numb, I feel nothing, I don't feel happy emotions either. It's not just sad ones. So then people will often self-harm to go, I need to feel something. I need to remind myself that I'm alive. And that is one of the most effective ways of doing it. Sometimes people will self-harm because causing themselves physical pain is a way to distract from the emotional pain. So if you've got, awful voices in your head, and if you've got incredible distress, and if you've got trauma around you, your head will be exploding with negative energy, self-recrimination, the voices of your abusers. And whilst you're self-harming, whatever you're doing, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about the self-harm, right? So that can be a distraction. And another one, and I'll stop soon so you have a pause. Another one, which I actually haven't heard of until I did my research, because I work with a lot of clients who self-harm, and I was a self-harmer for quite some time, is self-care. So some people who are so severely neglected and traumatized, they don't look after themselves because no one's ever shown them that they were important enough to look after. So what they do is when they self-harm, that is the only time afterwards they take care of themselves so that it doesn't get infected or they don't bleed out, and it's actually a comforting ritual, which I actually found incredibly sad to realize that that's the point that some people get to be able to look after themselves. And there's more, but I'll stop there. They're some of the big ones.
Wow, that's really incredible, powerful imagery there. I just want to ask you now, what happens when somebody has, say, visual scarring on their body? How does somebody who self-harm look at that? Like, in terms of, do they see the scarring there, or does it trigger off like a memory associated with it, or is it sort of kind of associated with the scarring?
It's a really good question, because you're right in every single answer. So annoyingly enough, this is a typical therapist thing to say, it depends on the person, but it really does. So with some self-harmers, it's almost like not a badge of honor, but they can become quite competitive. These are the people who get more addicted to the high.
Okay.
So then it's look at how much I've achieved. For some people, it's a symbol. It's like if someone goes through a really bad breakup, some people, they will actually they might do it once, they might just self-harm once, and leave a very bad scar, and it's very much, this is what you did to me, I am going to carry this with me to show whoever needs to see it that this is how much you hurt me. That's not that common. For a lot of self-harmers, they try not to look at the scars because they are triggering, and they can actually make them want to do it again. And there's a huge amount of shame. Normally it's shame. Normally it's, I know I did that to myself and other people won't understand, and I don't want anyone to ask me about it, and I don't want to look at it. People normally hide them, well, not normally. If they can afford to and they want to, tattoos hide a lot of self-harm scars. So yes, and it depends. You see, if we're talking about the trans community, where now I'm digressing, but it's actually related. So reasons to self-harm often fall into external and internal. Right? Now, in the trans community, like some other communities, we have both. So we have external reasons where we might have, okay, you're not welcome, you're not valid, you don't exist, we don't understand you, the world isn't set up for you, I don't want you in my family, you know, you're just pretending, you'll never be who you say, and more, right? So you've got the external stuff, and it might be, you've lost your home, you've lost your family, you lost your job, right? You're financially stressed. And then you've got internal. So then you've got the glorious mix of gender dysphoria, which not everyone has, but you know, if you've got gender dysphoria, social dysphoria, mental dysphoria, right? So not everyone has all three, but if you've got all three, that's terrible. So you've got dysphoria, you've also got a lot of people who do have mental health challenges, not because they're trans, right? You need to say that again and again and again. Often caused by the way we are treated, right? And just not having the family support in the environment causes a lot of internal distress. So then you've got external plus internal factors, right? And if you, one of the biggest, sorry, I'm just stopping for a minute. One of the, because it's quite, just, I'm naturally going to get distressed because I have clients who deal with this, and it's so sad for me because I just want to take it away magically and I can't. Who, because of the way that sometimes there's internalized transphobia, so because it's self-punishment, it's why don't I accept my body, or why doesn't my body look the way I want it to? Why do I look in the mirror and that's what I see? And then you get all the emotional distress, and then you get the, I need to hurt myself because I am nothing. I need to damage myself because I'm not physically okay.
And is that the case where some trans people try and mutilate their genitals or their particular regions of their body that they feel, yeah, I guess maybe just explore that a little bit. Is that part of shaming or anger or mixture or power to sort of take control?
Yeah, and again, all of that. You're very good. You should be doing my job. So a lot of the times it's you know, we often have to wait for surgeries, right? They're expensive, there's waiting lists, and in the meantime, you've got a body that doesn't look the way you can deal with it. And if you've got someone facing, okay, well, maybe you've got to wait 5 or 6 years. 5 or 6 years can be a long time when you're distressed, and you can get to a point, for some people, where it's, I'm just going to do it myself then. And obviously you need to get very, very distressed at this point. It's not common, right, that people will actually self-mutilate to that extent. What they'll often do is there'll be like a small attempt, not meant to be actual getting rid of a body part. That does happen, but it's normally a, oh, I did a bit, oh, I don't like that, oh, I can't do that, or, but it's a sign of, I just can't stand. Sorry, I'm doing this because I've had top surgery. I've got a little bit left at the front, but that's how I felt. I felt very, they just gotta go. It's like they just seriously, I just can't. I was very distressed by my chest, so I think I could easily have been driven to that point.
Yeah.
And yes, for some people it is anger. It can be anger against, why was I born with this body? I hate this body. I'm going to hurt myself. I don't see, I'll never be who I want to be. All of that.
So interesting, Tasha, and thank you for sharing that experience of that you've encountered with your own body. I can remember for me, my first encounter with the that feeling of dysphoria, if you want to call it. I don't know how to even. It was when I was 3, and it's such a vivid memory that stayed to me to here at 52, and that was the dream. I think I might have even mentioned it to you, and I can't even remember now if it was a dream or a thought, but it was so profound because I was 3, and I remember being in the car and having all my testicles and penis sitting on the dashboard or something of the car. And it was so traumatic for me at 3 to have that such a compelling dream. And now I wonder that obviously this is something in my brain from that point, realizing that I just didn't feel comfortable in my body from that age. And I think, and I don't really know what happened, whether I was sent to a doctor but that dysphoric feeling happened at such an early age that for me, it always sat with me to wondered why, this was my way, or my little mind telling already this is what's happened. And I do remember growing up laying in the bathtub as a young child, putting my legs in between. So I obviously had this idea, but growing up in the 70s, there was no language for it. And that was like a child. There's nothing on television, no media. So you really did feel like there was something terribly wrong as a secret that you couldn't tell. And maybe if I did tell, I think I actually was chastised and hit for those sort of feelings and being told you must never talk about things like this. And yet I remember dressing up at home as a child in my mum's clothing and shoes, and I continued to do that till just before I left, and it was sort of tolerated. But I just wanted to share that too, because if people are listening to it, to relate that these things that sit with us are so ingrained, and it, as Tasha knows, that I didn't come out till I was 50 trans publicly because of that shaming and thinking I can't hide, and I was hiding in the gay community. And I'm just wondering, Tasha, with your experience with people you work with, is that something that some people do? They go through like the realms of, I can't really come out as trans. It's easy if I come out as gay, and then finally, I don't know, like what's your sort of take on that?
Yeah, that is definitely something that happens. And sometimes it's not, well, often it's not conscious. It's well, I know I'm not, I know I'm not straight. That's as far as it goes, because you haven't got the language, like, okay, I must be gay then, right? So you're in the gay community and you're like, not quite right, but okay, because you don't know anything else. And I know, for example, with my wife, someone gave her a book at like age 54, just gave her a book. She wasn't in the gay community, right? They just gave her a book. And she got this book, and it was about being trans. And she read it and went, that's me. Oh my God, that's me. What is a trans person? Because you don't have it in your hemisphere, so you don't know, right? And yet some of us, for example, I've been out since I was about 16, not out as gender diverse because that came down the track, right? But out as being, I'm pansexual, so I was out from that age, and I've been in and out of gay relationships, straight relationships, like a typical pansexual, all over the place. And I never fitted in. It was always go to the gay event, there'd be the gay men over there, the lesbians over there, and like me in the middle on my own, going, well, okay, don't really know And actually, I was going to mention before, bisexuals have 6 to 8% higher self-harming rates than lesbians or gay, because we are not this is still the case. We are not welcome in a lot of places. We are told we're confused. Straight people don't want to date us. Gay people don't want to date us. Right? So you often end up like, well, what am I going to do? Okay, because I'm like, that you're invalidated. And then if on top of that, say you're bi or pan and you're gender diverse, like it's really hard to find a community, right? Because you're kind of like, oh, so you're invalidated everywhere. And now I've forgotten the question. Oh, yes, I remember. It's okay, I got it. So sometimes people do try and say to themselves, oh, I'm just going to be lesbian or gay because I know my family, they're all right with that. Or they might have mentioned something like you did and they got told very much, no, you're wrong, don't ever talk about that again, and those people are sinners and blah. And you think,
yeah.
Okay, I'll just be gay. Okay, fine. And sometimes it's not until, for me, it wasn't until I was with my trans wife who actually said to me at one point, we laugh about this because she's turned around and said, I never thought I'd be with anyone as male as you. I was like, what? You could be very male sometimes. I'm like, yes. I wanted to say no. And I was like, yes, you're right. And this is where I'm mainly cisgender, but I have a very strong masculine thinking and behavior. And sometimes this whole person comes out, right? And I look very femme, and then I'll say something or do something. And it wasn't until I was with her that I had the freedom to go, oh, you know what? I can let this person come out. This is great. This is okay. But when I started off, I was like, but I'm not like you. I'm not like my wife. I'm like, so what am I? Well, I don't know what I am. Oh, it's a journey. I don't have to define myself. Oh, that's all right then. That's okay. And I have social dysphoria a lot. So if I'm in a group of cisgender heterosexual women, I actually get quite uncomfortable because I'm just sitting there thinking, I feel really dysphoric. Like, I hope nobody knows. I just want to get up and walk away. I'm like, oh dear, how do I explain that? So I don't, because some people aren't ready. So for some of us, it's just a progression that happens. Some of us, it's because gender and sexuality are fluid. So some people are gender diverse for a while and then they're not. And that's not because they got confused. That's just because that's the way they're developing. And it's the same with sexuality. So the thing is, though, that is a really new concept for a lot of people. So there's still all this shame, and this is where a lot of the self-harming will come in, because it's, oh, well, I can kind of be lesbian or gay, that's okay. Oh, I can't be trans. No, that's not okay. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. And then there's all this, as we know, if we're denying who we are, there's all this distress. Inside, there's the whisperings of, but you're not being who you are. No, squash it down.
And is that one of the things, and I guess obviously voices and part that I was interested to hear your take too on this before we move into the way treatment or support, sorry, I don't like the word treatment, counselling, supportive counselling can help someone with self-harm in the trans space. Why do we not see, or will we ever see on, say, the media, say on television, documentaries about this important area about self-harming? Because there's I see very little documentaries on self-harming, and especially within the trans space. Why is that?
With self-harming, it's still one of those, it's a word that you say to people and they go, ooh, it's like saying serial murderer. People go, oh, but then they would watch a program about serial murderers, which is just, but self-harming is like, oh, I don't want to watch that, or I don't want to think about that, or that wouldn't happen to anyone I know. There's so much stigma around it. And my clients who come to me who are self-harmers, if they don't disclose straight up, it takes quite some time for that to come out, because naturally they're like, oh, you're going to judge me. or you're going to label me. And in the trans community, we have to be so careful, because the wider community a lot of the time like to think we're all like insane, right? Because apparently you have to be insane to be transgender. So if we, disclose that some of us self-harm, and that there is quite a high percentage, then the community out there who aren't educated go, oh, they're self-harming because they're transgender. You're like, no, they're self-harming because of all the other distress, not because they're transgender. It's educating people. You can have gender euphoria, not gender dysphoria, and you can still self-harm because of the way of other people treat us. So it's quite difficult to get that concept out, and for a lot of people, they will not, the media won't put that out, because they go, oh no, but people won't want to hear that. They won't want to read it, and also it's confronting. So I am a confronting person. I own up to that. So when I say things like that, people will think, oh no, we wouldn't do that. No, that's not the case. Like, well, actually you do that. You already do that. So I hope it will be talked about. It's not even talked about a lot in the counselling circles, especially not in the trans community. It's, I get asked all the time for support from other counsellors about how to support people in the trans community, because there's just not even enough awareness out there, which is why I get a lot of people interstate, or I have international clients, because the training is still not there, and let alone self-harm in the trans community. People, America's further ahead, but people just kind of go, I don't want to know about that, which is just tragic, because that's how people carry on.
And it's a taboo, and it's sort of, it goes, I remember reading something in the ethics of journalism, and it was one of the areas where they say they don't have suicide as because of this fear of that it will trigger people to enact that behavior. And one of my thinking was, well, hang on a minute, that just sort of, we're kind of oversimplifying the issue, and we need to disrupt these this notion that we hide away or we fear so we don't show something. And unless we do that, unless we, as you're saying, Tasha, we bring this out to the public discourse where people can talk about it, to understand it, and take away the shame and stigma of this action that you're taking against your body as a way of looking for release. And it's not attributed, and thank you so much for really highlighting that it's not a result of one being trans that you are doing this action. It's the relationship you have with your environment that is which not affirming you and complicated. So I really am happy that you've highlighted this for all of us who are listening to this, to really take that on board. And I suppose this is part of your counselling, where this helps people who come to see you, that, or to kind of try to work out that it's not themselves has somehow impaired mentally, but it's a result. So how do people, Tasha, and I think you touched it, they come to you with this disclosure to see you?
Yeah, it's like I said, sometimes it's not common that people, it's on, we have questionnaires when we, most of us, when we have new clients, and it is on there where you get the option, but you don't have to tell me if there's been like self-harming or suicidal, attempts, just so I know. But I also know that when people don't write on there, it doesn't mean it hasn't happened. Right, so what tends to happen is, naturally with any counselling, you get to know each other to start off with. And this is if they haven't disclosed. If they've disclosed, they've normally seen someone else before and it didn't help, right? So then they look for someone who, I advertise that I work with self-harmers and that I was a self-harmer. So then they look for someone like me and they're like, oh, okay, I can tell her. And I obviously self-disclose a lot, So I will tell them, if they're coming to me for self-harming, I will tell them a bit about my story so that it normalizes it. And I'll just backtrack a bit. So if they've come in and they haven't self-disclosed, like any therapist, you just watch for little signs, you listen for things they might say, and you think, okay, maybe every now and again I might say, so, you know, do you ever feel a need that you need to kind of reprimand yourself in some way? You know, how do you get rid of your tension? And it will normally come up unless I spot a scar or something, and then I have to be very, very careful how and when I bring that up. And there is never ever an expectation that they tell me. I always say, you don't have to answer me. I'm asking you because I'm concerned, I'd like to help. And anyway, so say we get to the point where I do know. What happens then? First thing, most important thing, which a lot of people don't do, normalize it, as in not make it sound really blasé, but as in, I understand why you would do that. There are these factors in your life. We work out, okay, what are the triggers? What's going on here? What's the function of the self-harm for you? Like I said, is it addictive? Is it a form of communication? Is it self-punishment? And then again, normalize it. Okay, I can understand why you do that. Other people, like I said, might go and have drugs, or other people might go and have an argument. You do this. Okay, it serves a function. I get it. Okay, now we understand why you do it. Okay, let's find the triggers. And that might be keeping a diary. That's the best way of monitoring your moods. Every little thing. Oh, there was another one. And, you know, for me to know actually how often do you self-harm? And normally people will minimize it. So it's like, can you just keep a diary for a week? And then you don't have to look at it day by day. Just give it to me. And then I'll look at it. And then I might go, okay, right. Here's the trends. Were you aware of this? Okay, right. So then we have a better picture of what's going on. There are, like I said before, external factors and internal factors. So then as a therapist, what we do, the royal we, what I do is look at, okay, what's getting in the way of you getting better? And how can we get rid of that? Or how can we like manage that? So it might be, for example, in the trans community, non-supportive family members. Right, okay. How can you minimize contact with them? How can you educate them? Can I meet with them? It might be bullying in school. Okay, can I meet with a guidance counselor? Like, you know, you get on an action plan with those external factors. Internal factors, right. Gender dysphoria. What do you do when you're dysphoric? Okay, there's these 3 things you do. Okay, here's another 4. Let's try these, right? It might be general emotional distress. And then I will just, because I'm the type of therapist who works with lots of strategies, I'll be like, okay, here's a bundle. Off you go. Go and try 1 or 2, come back, let's see how we go. Let's try some in session. Let's make this fun. So I try and go, okay, let's minimize all those negative influences. And now, okay, what makes you feel good, right? Let's bring more of that. Or you don't have anything that makes you feel good? Okay, let's find something. And then it's the, okay, right, you get the urge, you really want to self-harm. Let's look at what can be a replacement behavior. So for some people who, trigger warning now, I'm not going to get too graphic, but for some people who need to see a certain result, it's okay, can you draw that on yourself? So without actually injuring yourself, draw what you would want to see. I have clients who, I laugh because they send me pictures. So I have clients who stab tomatoes. So I tell them to get a load of tomatoes, put them on a shelf, and just put a fork in them. Right? When that's what you've, and because it's, you know, a certain result when you put a fork in, they're like, oh, that felt good. And I've got clients who'll send me pictures of tomatoes with like 6 forks sticking out. And I'm like, oh, that was a bad day. Okay. It's for some people, it might be, okay, you're angry. Let's look at ways you can get rid of the anger, or let's look at relaxation strategies. So you cannot, this is where therapists used to fall down a lot when I was self-harming, was let's just extract your coping mechanism. Let's just take that away and we won't give you another one. And you're just going to have to sit with all that distress with no way of coping. And then normally you'll have a breakdown, right? Because you have taken, it's a bit like saying to someone who's a drug addict and smokes and drinks, okay, you're going to have access to none of them. I'm locking you up in a hospital with no replacement drugs and you're going to sit in a room and not talk to anyone. You have to give coping mechanisms, new ones before. And I never say to someone, I want you to stop harming, because that's not my choice. I can't say that, and I wouldn't say that. It's harm minimization. So, okay, it was 10 times this week. Do you think could we try for 8 or 9? Could we do that? And often you'll get, oh yeah, I could do that. That's like dropping 1 or 2. I'm like, yeah, okay, let's try that. Let's try that for a while. Let's see how you go with that for a while. And then we'll step it down. So it's very, very gentle, but it's constantly going, okay, how's these new coping mechanisms going? They're getting better? Great. And then particularly for the trans community, you know, like with any distress we have in the trans community, surround yourself by your community. Be in contact with other genuine, supportive, inspirational people. Watch inspirational trans people on YouTube. Whatever you need to do to go, we are okay. I am okay. There are people like me out there who are amazing, and I am amazing, right? So it's constantly having that in your mind, not the discrimination.
And that's a great way to almost end this, because you've really given us a journey of what it is. You've explained it, you've unpacked it for us, shown us a way forward, and your approach to working effectively with clients. And of course, as always, we'll put up your contact details if people want to reach out to you, or have a friend that they are worried about, and they maybe that they can give your details on, which would be wonderful to listen to this. And if anyone is listening and they're feeling triggered, please reach out to Lifeline. They're available to speak to you 24 hours a day. And then what I would always say, you know, connect to a LGBTIQ counselling services in your state. That would really help you. And of course, Tasha Turner to be referred to her counselling service for follow-up and support. Like, and as Tasha said, you're never alone. There's many of us, there's many support groups around for trans, diverse peer education, many spaces. Don't feel alone, don't feel ashamed. There are many of us who've gone through it, who can lead successful lives. And you know, it's so thank you so much, Tasha Turner. It's been a real privilege again to speak with you. And anyone listening, again, thank you so much for listening to us right to the end, because we hope you've taken something away positive from this experience, and maybe it will help you understand if you have friends or close friend or relative who is trans and has disclosed that they're self-harmed or they are self-harmers, to kind of, instead of hiding or not knowing, we hope we're giving you some positive steps forward to kind of break that stigma around it. Thank you so much, Tasha Turner, for being on Voices today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.